Welcome to Pastorpedia. CE National, we're a part of pastoring and helping and coaching. In my 55 years, yes, that long of being a pastor or coaching pastors, I've never seen a more difficult time than right now, this fall, these days. Not only because of COVID and physical, medical questions that are so difficult, but also the spiritual climate of America and also the racial, the political climate. It's so divided and so tough. So we're going to hit the area of the COVID problems. Many of you have already made decisions. Many of you are still making them. I'm with Jeff Bogue from Akron, Ohio, Jim Brown from Goshen, Indiana. Let's talk about the COVID. How are you handling so many different opinions in your church? Jeff?
You try to handle them graciously and with leadership. And so I think what you're going to find with COVID is you're not going to get a consensus, right? And so there's people who have very strong opinions about that are kind of a little bit more fearful of what COVID can do and how it will affect people. There's people on the other end of the spectrum, at least in Akron, Ohio, that are almost dismissive of the health concerns. And somewhere in the middle needs to be the church where we're aware, we're trying to work with our local governments. So I would say as a church leader, I've never had to interact with my local government and state government as much as I am right now, and paying attention to what they're doing. Not wanting to live in fear. Also recognizing, COVID is something that you probably take the most seriously after you've had it or you know someone who has. I would see the impact of it.
I would agree with that, Jeff. And I think two words kind of stick out for me. We're adjusting and we're trusting. Mm-hmm. I'm finding that I'm listening more than I ever have and talking less. But in doing so, Kerry Newhoff had a really good article in regards to leaders during this time. And he said there's three kind of leaders. There's a frozen leader, there's a hesitant leader, and there's an agile leader. And frozen leaders don't know what to do. Hesitant leaders ask questions, they move to a point, but they don't move past that. And your agile leader is your best leader during this kind of time. And I'm just asking the Spirit of God to help me to be an agile leader.
When he says agile, what did he mean? You're willing to flex?
Flexible, opportunistic, focus on what that you can control, not on what you can't control. So focus on what you can do and make actions. Let your people see that you're doing something to move your people through that.
Yeah, I think as a leader that you have to move past the idea that things are going to go back to normal. They're not. This is a kind of a global event. It doesn't mean that things won't settle down and they won't settle in. But people are going to be different coming out of COVID, and that agile leader is looking forward instead of trying to reclaim what they once had.
People are even divided over this.
Big time, big time.
It's probably the most volatile piece of equipment in the world right now.
Most controversial piece of clothing.
Because, honestly, we land at different places. So my hope has been, as I said earlier, Jeff alluded to we're in discussion about it. I encourage our people to hear from the Lord. It's the first time in my life I ever had to police or make an opportunity to police something. So I tell our people, I don't police you when you drive 55 miles an hour. There's other laws of the lands or mandates, but I'm asking you to hear from the Lord, let the Spirit of God lead you. So we kind of let our people react that way.
A number of churches I coach have taken surveys. What do you think of that?
Surveys just tell you the amount of disagreement you're going to face. You have to make a decision as a leader. And I do think you can be creative in your leadership. So at Grace, we have created multiple services. And what we've done is we've created services where masks are kind of on lockdown. We call it a mask required service. And so all staff, all volunteers, and we will at that one service basically ask you to put a mask on if you don't have them.
Sing all the time?
We sing, but through mask. Right. And then in our state, we're able to sing and teach without masks from the platform if you're an officiant. Our other services, we call them mask expected services. So in our county, we're under a mask mandate. We're told to drive 55. And my attitude's kind of the same as Jim's. I look and say, it's not my job to be the police. You have to do that in due conscience. But this one service where people are very sensitive, we do police that one strongly, and then offer lots and lots of online options.
I think the point is, we've been thinking, as I train as a leader, I probably spend more time praying than I've ever have through this time, because I want to hear from the Lord. And kind of two words that surface for me are, Jim, lead with love and lead with courage. And I when you hear from God, you've taken in all the pieces of your people, your elders, all in leadership. Make a decision and courageously stand for it.
Yeah.
I think what can happen is, when we first went back, we've been open since Mother's Day, so it's been 3 months. And finally, within the last, I say 6 weeks, our live attendance has crossed over our online attendance. And every church has its own dynamic. Like, I respect what you're doing, and I respect what other churches are doing, but I think the nature, they're going to look a little different. So
How do you connect with these new online people? That's a big challenge.
we have a pastor who officiates every service. We had, by God's grace, we were already online before COVID. So we have a pastor that answers. What we found too is your live stream audience doesn't comment as much as your Facebook Live does. And so we've really pushed people to Facebook Live to interact with one another. So they're asking questions. They have my notes. They're looking at him. They're prompting ahead. We even stopped by every person in our church that hasn't been back as pastors, took them an ice cream coupon, prayed with them on their porches. So we're trying to connect with people that aren't in services.
That's sort of a bribe to give them ice cream.
Hey, whatever works.
How about online?
We do a virtual lobby, which is a big deal. So that's basically your pastor hosting. One of the biggest things online is that you need to respond to comments. So when someone is commenting, whether it's on a live stream, Facebook live stream, YouTube, Instagram will be all the platforms that we live stream on. When they're commenting, they are talking to you. It's no different than having a conversation in the lobby. So if someone came up to you in the lobby and said, "Hey, New, how you're doing?" and you just stood there and said nothing, that would be incredibly awkward. That's what happens online. So we're pursuing that with staff. The staff have certain assignments now that they have to kind of fulfill and fill up those spaces online. Then we also actually started to recruit a lot of social media volunteers. And so our social media now, through trained and equipped volunteers, is watched 24/7, and we will respond personally and engage personally. That volunteer will actually oftentimes help to transition that into a live interaction, and that's how we're tackling it right now. But we're learning. If you're watching this and you feel behind the curve and you feel confused, you're in the right club. Like, we're learning as we go.
I would agree with that, and I would say, somehow let your people know that they're connected. There is power in gathering.
Yeah.
So however you gather, there's power in it. So make people feel part of the gathering, whether they're online or they're live in your rooms.
John MacArthur didn't count online when he wrote his edict or letter. Do you count that as gathering?
We do count
Yes.
that as gathering,
Yes.
And
we have a formula that we use that's kind of addresses how many potential people are in that home. If an adult and they're married, they potentially have a child. So we looked at, and we're on the low side of it. So yeah, we count that.
You count the dogs. Did you say
Adults.
dogs?
Yeah.
But you have. Let me say this to everyone: if you're going to count online, you have to count honestly.
Yes.
Facebook views aren't people.
Right.
They're stop bys, right? So we're tied in enough that we count the number of devices that tunes into us.
There's all kind of.
And then we did survey to find out how many people tend to be attached to a device. So we can give it a multiplier of 1.5 or 2, depending on, so if there's one phone, we realize that 2 people are probably watching that phone. So you have to be careful with it. And like Jim said, err on the conservative side, or you're going to think your attendance blew up and it didn't. That's just people buzzing past your feed.
I think when you preach, I'm looking, when I open up all our services, I address them and say, hey, for those of you online, those of you in our FM parking lot radio, we're talking to you. So address them, pull them in. And even as you give an application, last week we were praying, walk outside of your house and pray. So I'm talking right to them like they are there.
Good. I do that when my wife and I have dinner together. She's in the basement, like we assume. Let me ask a third question. As leaders, we're all in positions of leadership. What are some lessons you've learned? General lessons, because leaders have dropped out during this time. It's a rough time.
This is hands down the biggest leadership lift of my career ministry, 27 years. This is what I would say. You guys show up. I really agree with Jim. You got to lead with courage. You're not going to win. You're not going to be able to lead by consensus. You have to get over that. So you have to ask the Holy Spirit to give you wisdom of where to go and then the courage to go there. Communicate. Shepherd your flock. It's those kind of basic things is probably the biggest thing.
Don't let one or two voices of criticism squash forward movement.
Yeah.
You're going to get criticized. And by the way, listen to it. There's constructive criticism. I've been sharpened, but I'm not going to let the voice of 3 or 4 emails dictate the direction and the vision of Grace Community Church.
And don't take one side of Washington, D.C. The fighting back and forth is just awful. We'd all say, come on, you guys, you people. But stand carefully. Anything else you've learned? People trust you.
I would say this. I'm a different pastor because of it. And I feel closer to God than I ever have because I've had to lean on Him more than ever. Yeah.
Interesting. Good.
Yeah, I'm trying to love my folks, right? And so as much as our life is disrupted, their lives are disrupted. And this is where we are shepherds. We're not sheep. And my sheep, a storm has hit the flock. And so finding them, caring for them, walking through them, being sympathetic that their business just blew up and their school just got canceled and they're stuck in the house all day. It's a lot of care, and I've just been committed to doing it. I've asked the Lord for joy. The joy of the Lord is our strength, and that's where I find strength at. There are enormous, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 16, there are great doors of effective work that are open. They were open to him in Ephesus. There are great doors of effective work that are open. So I'm asking the Lord to show us that too. So it's not all bad, it's just different, and it's mostly disruptive. And just looking and saying, as a leader, that's my job. I'm captain on the bridge in the middle of the hurricane. That's the way it goes.
I would just quote for last slide, give people hope.
Yeah.
Point them to Jesus. Let them know that He can do the impossible. Like, point them to Jesus.
You know, we're doing what the early church did, and their COVID was often being killed and murdered, and the instructions are so clear. I would also add a mean one that in COVID, many pastors, a number that I coach, didn't get reports from staff, and some people got lazy during the time instead of working hard. Leadership means you take charge in a loving way.
Yeah.
We've been on a tough subject. We don't think we have the answers so much as things we've learned, and keep seeking those answers and keep directing people to their hope. Now, the Lord is my shepherd, but you've been appointed a shepherd for that local church. We wish you well on that. Would help any way we can by correspondence. With Jim Brown and Jeff Bogue, I'm Newt Larson for CE National. Thank you.